Hey folks, just a quick fun lesson today. I wanted to teach you one of the outro licks from Innocent Days by Giant. And I think this is such a gem because essentially the track's already over at this point and it's fading out, and then you just get this like blistering sort of sweep pick legato run, which just sounds crazy good. So I figured it out and I wanted to share it with you guys. So let's just jump straight into this. Okay, so as usual, I want to give you a little theoretical backdrop before we jump into how to play this thing. We are centered around B, and we're really centered around B mixed Lydian, which means that we're in the key of E major overall. That's our umbrella key, and we are centering around the 5 chord, which gives us the intervals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7. Okay, which is like one of my favorite sounds. It's really fun because it's majory, but it's not as kind of, you know, just blindly upbeat as something like Ionian. So that's kind of our canvas, what we're working with here. Now this lick, we're kind of leaning on 2 things. We're using the mixed Lydian mode, but we're also using another arpeggio from within the key. So within the key of E major, we've got 3 major chords, which is E major, A major, and B major. And what Dan does is lean on one of the other arpeggios from this key. He leans on A major, okay? So that's kind of the 2 components we're using here. B mixed Lydian mode, A major arpeggio. Okay, let's get into the actual notes. So to start off with, we're basically kind of outlining a major triad starting on the 3rd. So we are beginning with a slide into the 11th fret of the D string. We then have the 9th fret of the G string, and then our middle finger on the 10th fret of the B, and then index finger on the 9th fret of the high E. So we get, and Dan kind of staggers it. It's kind of like the way into this lick is almost like falling down the stairs. He kind of revs up to it, and as he moves through the arpeggio, it gets faster. So you can kind of stagger the first couple of notes and then go for it. Okay, and then we add one more note before we get into the fast descending bit, which is this note on the 11th fret of the E. Okay, so as you can see, what we're doing here, although we're very clearly outlining the 3rd, 5th root and then another 3rd of A, this is happening within the context of B overall. So it means that it's not really going to sound like a 3rd, 5th root, etc. It's going to sound relative to our root note of B as if we're playing a 2nd and then a 4th and then a flat 7. So whatever's happening underneath recontextualizes whatever you're doing at the moment. Okay, so when we play this first part of the phrase, we're using all downstrokes, and rather than attacking each string afresh, it's really going to be one movement. Think of it more akin to when you strum a chord, rather than striking a chord, when you strum it slowly. Think about like the intro chord of Paradise City by Guns N' Roses or something like that. It's a single motion, but it's controlled. You're kind of staggering each string evenly, and that's the same thing you're doing here. The only difference is that when you're doing sweep picking, you are releasing each note as you move to the next one. So there will not be any kind of any double stops or any notes ringing into the next. They're all going to be separated like that. When we reach the top of that arpeggio, we switch to alternate picking for a second. So we have our slide, down, 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 up, down. Okay, and that's the start of our next phrase, which is the legato segment of this. So we get... Okay, so that phrase kind of leads us into the lick, and then we embark on the bulk of the lick, which is this legato section, okay? So to start with, we have this. Okay, which is we're just coming down the scale really. So we have 10th, 11th, 9th on the E. So pick, pull off, 12th, 10th, 9th on the B. Again, pick, pull off. And then 11, 9, 8 on the G. So we get... Okay. We then double up that last part of the lick again. So we do that twice. Now, disclaimer, at this part of the lick, there's actually a little grace note that Dan does, which I didn't do, because it's the sort of thing you're not entirely sure whether it's completely deliberate or just a byproduct of him playing it so fast. So on the record, you hear him slide into the 11th fret of the D string from the 12th. I didn't do the slide when I did it, I just did... I just played the 11th fret of the D, followed by the 9th fret pulling off to the 8th on the G. Okay, so we get... Okay, so far... Now, to finish this off, we get that phrase, which is going to be a bit stretchy. So we've got, starting at the 11th fret of the D string, pulling off from 11th, 9th to 7th, and then sliding down one fret further to the 6th. Okay, and then moving to the A string. I know this looks weird because it's my 7 string. It's like the fastest playing guitar I've got, so sorry if this is looking a bit visually confusing. We're then pulling off on the A string from 9th to 7th to 6th. And then we are basically concluding our phrase, landing on the root note, pulling off from the major 2nd to the root, the 9th to the 7th of the E. And that's it. So really slowly, the whole lick is like this. Now, just a couple of quick pointers on technique. You'll probably have to work on the sweep picking aspect of it separately, and that's what I would do. I wouldn't try and play the lick all the way through it every time. I'd break it into little component sections, starting with the sweep picking thing, and trying to find that pick angle where you don't get stuck in your strings, which usually means kind of like angling it a little bit. So rather than being completely perpendicular to the scratch plate, you're kind of leaning forward, and then you get a little bit less resistance. Some people like to tilt it forward as well, but it does start to change the tone a little bit. You might like that. Now you have a little bit of flexibility because, as I said, Dan is not completely rigid with his timing here. He kind of staggers it, but then once he's into the legato bit, it's kind of pretty consistent, okay? So when it comes to legato playing, there's a couple of things that I'd recommend you do. The first is that we are striving to make the difference between picked notes and hammered and pulled off notes as little as possible. Now this is partly to do with left hand strength, so making sure that your pull-offs are nice and strong, but it can also be a case of softening the attack of the right hand, so that rather than having a big accent, if you soften your pick attack, it will kind of even out the dynamics between that and the pull-offs. Okay, so I'm picking pretty gently, and granted I am using kind of like a good amount of gain, which I wouldn't usually do, but it sounds like Dan is with this particular track, and it does help a lot with this sort of lick. Okay, so that's my first point, is try and level out your picking and your legato sort of dynamics by probably softening the pick attack. Okay, so the other kind of thing to consider with legato playing is we want to try and minimize any minuscule moments of silence. Okay, we don't want any gaps occurring when we're changing strings. So one thing that I sometimes do to practice this is to actually allow a moment, and we're talking like a fraction of a second overlap. So when we're changing from, let's say, the E to the B string, I'm actually letting the two notes exist for like a fraction of a second, because I know that's going to make sure that we don't have anything breaking up the flow of our phrase. ultimately what we're aiming for is like really good synchronization, so that when we arrive at our new string, the right hand is ready and can continue the sequence in time. But if you find that your legato playing doesn't sound smooth, the exercise of allowing a little bit of kind of cross blur between strings can be handy, because it might highlight the fact that you are releasing one of the strings too early and therefore creating a gap. Now, my final bit of advice just working on this stuff is that Dan plays it so fast, and I don't think I was even at tempo really, because I wasn't doing it with the track when I did it at the beginning. But it's so quick that it's very difficult to process every note of the phrase at once. So what I'd advise you do is create kind of anchor points. So by that, what I mean is focus on like a particular part of the phrase midway through or a third of the way through it to concentrate on, and use that as like a jumping off point for the next bit. You won't be able to process every note individually because it's too quick. So with me, when I did it, my first part of it is that I'm targeting this, because I know that that note has to be really clean to start my phrase off correctly. And then I was focusing on another one midway through. So as I was going through the legato section, I was targeting that note because it all gets a bit blurry around here because we're lingering around the same 3 frets for a while. So I was targeting that note, again as a little anchor point. It's kind of like a gateway into the last part of the lick. So just to show you my kind of thought process as I'm doing it, I'm thinking about arriving there nice and cleanly. I'm thinking about targeting that note because that is kind of the beginning of our final descent to the root note. As usual, what I'd really implore you guys to do is think about how you can apply this within your own playing and your own playing situations. So for me, it's kind of a nice easy one in a way, because if we're in B mixed Lydian, again, we're very much centering around the shape for which the root note is on the low E string, which we like that because we're very familiar with it through pentatonic shapes and stuff like that. So I'm just visualizing that this phrase is kind of moving 2 frets up from that position and then dropping back down into it to resolve it. So if I'm kind of improvising, I'm looking 2 frets up from my kind of first position box shape to begin the Huff lick. Okay, that was kind of sloppily played, but just to give you like an idea, you do kind of have to concentrate quite a lot. And one thing that's also really important is making sure that you're connecting with the right part of your fingers for the legato section. That was the one thing that I forgot to mention before. So you want to be almost on kind of tiptoe, making sure that you're making a good connection with every fret. Otherwise it's going to sound lumpy and you're not going to get that fluid sort of thing. Okay folks, that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson. If you are enjoying these lessons and these videos and would like to support me in making more of them, you can do so via my Buy Me a Coffee page. There's a link to that below. I really appreciate everyone who contributes to that. And if you're new here, drop me a comment and say hi, and please subscribe for more stuff like this. For everyone else, have a wonderful week and I'll catch you next Sunday. Bye guys.